Roger here. This is my fourth little mini video on European arguments, and been talking about a lot of different things. And on this one, I'm going to be talking about talking to the police. This is a big issue. It's a really sensitive issue, and it is difficult to deal with because there's lots of emotions and strong feelings and views involved. So I want to acknowledge that before I start. And what I also want to say is everything I'm going to say in the next 10-15 minutes is not telling anyone what to do, right? What I'm going to do is produce some evidence and make an argument. If you don't like that argument, that's fine. You don't need to deal with it. But that's all I'm doing. I'm putting forward a point of view, and anyone watching it has to decide what to do. So it's not like you must go and talk to the police. You must put yourself in harm's way. You must put yourself in catastrophic harm's way, right? I mean, that's your decision. I'm making an argument about what's effective in terms of building a mass social movement in order to stop our children from starving. That's where I'm coming from. So it's important, and this is a big sort of meta point, I suppose, is if we're going to be successful, we need to be able to freely deliberate on things which are difficult to work out whether they're actually working or not. And maybe they are, maybe they're not. But we're not going to work that out unless we look at evidence and we argue over it, as you might say, in a sort of data-driven sort of way. So it's not like this is the religious, political, dogmatic view, and that's the end of the argument. Those days have gone, right? We can't afford the luxury of dogma. We need to be looking at what actually works, or rather what could work or might work. We never know. So just leading on from this point, there's a related point, which is I'm not making a moral argument. I'm not interested, in terms of my analysis, of trying to decide or argue over whether the police are racist, whether they're violent, whether they're fascist or whatever, like whether they're bad people. What I'm interested in is this mobilisation situation. In other words, what's effective. And obviously, the police can and do often act in terrible ways. The point of this video is not arguing about that. It's not arguing about what the police are like. It's making a point about how to maximise mobilisation, okay? And the moral, if you want a moral argument for mobilisation, the whole point of Extinction Rebellion is to be strategic, to think about what brings about mass mobilisation, because what the data has shown over the last 100 years is you can't change anything unless you have a mass movement. That's the fundamental point of Extinction Rebellion. So what the question is, how do we actually get to that point? Okay, so I'm going to give you a plan, all right, about how to deal with the police. So I'm going to describe it first, and then I'm going to give an argument about why it works, and then give a few examples, evidence as it were. But my proposal is that you talk to the police. And I don't just mean talk to the police in a nice country, in inverted commas, like Britain. In principle, I'm in favour of talking to the police in any situation, right? I mean, we can argue about super extreme situations, but let's say, for the sake of argument, definitely in France, America, around the Western world. That's what I'm primarily talking about. But arguably, you can talk about this in the global south as well. So I want to make a specific proposal, particularly for the European countries, that you do the following, and the US, around the Western world, okay? Which is, when you've got an action, or rather, before you organise any actions, you phone the police up and you say, hello, we're Extinction Rebellion. We're a peaceful, non-violent movement that is protesting about the climate crisis that affects everybody. We would like to come and talk to you about our movement and about what we intend to do. So you get an appointment with them, you go in the door, and for 15 minutes you tell them about the climate crisis and then about your methodology of change, which is we will be breaking the law, okay? And the thing that you want to emphasise in this communication is two things: that we're a peaceful, non-violent movement, right? We don't believe in violence and we're disciplined. You can rely on us to remain non-violent. Secondly, we respect you have to do your job, okay? So this might sound a little bit controversial, but respecting doesn't mean you necessarily agree. It just means we respect that from your point of view, you have to do your job here. Your job, as you understand it, is public order and maintaining the law. And what that means is if someone's breaking the law, then you're going to arrest someone and potentially you're going to go to prison. So our message to you is, that's fine, we understand that's what you have to do, and we're coming to you to say that we are not going to resist arrest, right? We're not going to be running down the street with you chasing us. If you want to arrest people, that's fine, okay? So my second proposition is that when you're actually in the field, as it were, and you're sitting in the road or whatever's happening, and the police come up, you have a police liaison person. And the police liaison person goes up to the police and does the following two things, which is the same thing, which is to say, I'm here to let you know that this protest today is a peaceful, non-violent protest. It's not going to be violent, it's not going to be aggressive. We are simply peacefully sitting in the road or whatever you're doing. Secondly, I want to say to you that we totally respect that you have to do your job here. If you want to arrest the people sitting in the road today, that's totally fine. You know, if you want to ask any questions about it, I'm available to communicate to you about this. I'm not in charge. No, I'm simply here to communicate what's happening. And if I can help you in any way, that's fine. And then you might want to go away for 5 minutes and come back and then, you know, ask who's in charge, as it were. And they'll, of course, be asking who's in charge. And you'll say, you know, no one's in charge, but you can talk to me, and variations on the theme. So note, right, this is not giving away any technical information, obviously not giving anyone's names or anything silly like that. What you're doing is establishing, like, some protocols of interaction, as you might say, how they're going to treat you and what they can expect from you. This is useful. The police like to know what they're dealing with, and you're helping them with that process. Okay. So obviously we can embellish on that, but you know, this is a short video. But that's, when I say talking to the police, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about talking to the police to ask permission about blocking road. When you go and see the police, you're saying, we're going to be blocking the road, right? But what you're doing is going to tell them this information. You're not telling them about all your plans. You're telling them that it's a peaceful protest, and if they want to arrest you, that's fine, okay? So there's three reasons actually, why this actually works, or at least could work, or you might say should work, okay? So again, you know, never say never. You know, there's always a possibility they're all going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. But there's three specific reasons. So the first one is it humanizes the relationship. And, you know, a lot of left-wing people and a lot of right-wing people have a very materialistic idea about political dynamics. It's a bit like, they've got that interest, we've got this, bang, we have this confrontation, right? You know, it's very sort of Marxist, or, you know, lots of right-wing people think the same thing, you know, the world is basically a battle between different forces. Well, you know, there's a lot going for that point of view, I'm not disputing that for a minute, but there's something else, and that's human contact. And human contact, arguably, and very often, trumps economic interest. So what I mean by that is, if you go and see the police, and you're talking to the head officer for the sake of argument, when you've talked to him about this, then inevitably you're going to start having some small talk, right? And you know, if you're a reasonably sociable person, you're going to end up talking about your kids and the weather and all the rest of it. And you might think, you know, from a reductive point of view, you might think, well, that's all irrelevant, but it's not. There's plenty of research that shows that if people treat each other decently and professionally and respectfully, then it's very difficult to hate them. It's a bit like, well, you know, I'm not sure about these protesters, but, you know, it's sort of interesting they came to talk to us. And that means that you start opening up this relationship whereby you can come to some sort of understanding. And the understanding is that this protest is going to be non-violent. So that's important for the police that they understand that. And secondly, that you're not like against the police, you know, in terms of this action. I mean, the important thing to realise here is you can hate the police as much as you like or think they're terrible. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is behaviour and speech, what you actually say to them and how you act towards them. Right? You can have your particular attitudes. That's neither here nor there. What we're talking about is practice, as you might say. So that's the humanisation side of it. So the next thing is predictability. Like, particularly in the Western world, police forces are professional. That doesn't mean that they're always professional, but what it means is they're primarily concerned with what you might call a protocol-led approach. They have rules about how to act, And I said, if you're the wrong, if your skin's the wrong colour and you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, then that might not be the case. But the fact of the matter is they're not a mob, right? They have a hierarchy, they have rules, and one of the biggest rules is this situation we're dealing with predictable or not? If it's not predictable, then we cannot afford to let anything tricky happen. They're responsible for public order. So if they're going to have a demonstration and they have some intelligence that it could go into a riot, right, they will bring the riot police, even if there's only a 5% chance, because they can't afford for that not to happen. Now, if you're dealing with Extinction Rebellion or an Extinction Rebellion-esque operation, and you go and say, look, we'll be blocking this road for 10 minutes and then we're going to get off, right? If you do that like 3 or 4 times and you follow those rules, in other words, you do what you say you're going to do, they're not stupid. They're going to start going, well, that's Extinction Rebellion. And if they say they're staying on the road for 10 minutes, then they're probably going to do it, which means we don't have to overreact, right? We don't have to send like 300 police to have 20 old age pensioners in Vienna sitting in the road for like 10 minutes. They do if they think they're going to be there for 2 hours. But if they know they're only going to be there for 10 minutes, then they'll just send like 5, right? And they might not even arrest you because it's a palaver, right? So the more that you can create this trust through humanization, and the more they can actually empirically analyze that you do what you say you're going to do, then they're less likely to overreact. Again, never say never, but they're less likely, right? It's all about probabilities, which leads us on to like an even more fundamental thing, which is cost, right? The fact of the matter is, being brutal and over-policing and using riot police and all the rest of it costs loads of money, right? And this is what the Metropolitan Police have sorted out in London. Everyone thinks the Metropolitan Police in London are like, civilised British people. Well, maybe not, right? But what we do know for certain is they've got a very small budget, right? They'd love to have a bigger budget. And when you've got a small budget, everyone knows you have to cut costs. And the best way of cutting costs is not to have to over-police, right? So if they know that it's super peaceful and it's going to be, old people sitting in the road or whatever it's going to be, they're going to, number one, decide not to arrest people because arresting people costs money. Or if they do decide to arrest people, why do they want to go to the costly extreme of having, a whole load of police violence and riot police and all the rest of it? It doesn't make any sense. You've only got a certain amount of money, so you want to spend it wisely. So those combinations enable you to do civil disobedience and not have an overreaction from the police. Which brings me on to the strategic point here, which is if we're going to build a civil resistance movement through civil disobedience, we need lots of people. If you go out on day one and start shouting at the police and wearing hoods and all the rest of it, the police are going to come down on you like a ton of bricks, right? Everyone knows that. That's not going to encourage, Mrs. Jones, 60-year-old lady from, some rural French town to come up to Paris. She's going to think, hang on a minute, sure, I'm willing to sit in the road, but I don't want to sit in the road and get my, head beaten up. While if she knows she's coming up to Paris to basically sit in the road, and it's happened 2 or 3 times before, and she's seen it on video, and people are like basically like just dragged off, she thinks, yeah, I can cope with that, so what? So what we need to strategically design is a low police response combined with civil disobedience in order to get to the critical mass, which is several thousand people sitting on the road to Paris or Brussels. How are we going to do that? Is by getting the police, of course, to behave themselves. How do you do that? Through humanisation, through providing predictability, and through enabling them to police Extinction Rebellion events at low cost. So you can see this has nothing to do like some grand ideology about the fascist police or the ruling class or whatever, right? Maybe not, right? This is about concrete empirical observation of dealing with the police over the last 2 years in the UK. So I've been to dozens of meetings, a lot of meetings with the police, and that enables me to collect intelligence. And obviously they're collecting intelligence about me, which brings us on to the final point, which is design civil disobedience so it doesn't matter that the police know about it, right? You can design things where it's got to be secret, which is great, but if it's secret, you're going to provoke a big police response. And also, people don't know about it, so you can't do mass civil disobedience. So what you want to organise is with the police, as it were, so the police know, so you can go and see the police afterward. This is the golden rule. Go and see the police and actually tell them. And if that fundamentally undermines the action, then redesign it. So, for instance, let's say you're in New York, and you say, look, at some point during 7th of October, 500 people are going to sit in the road. I'm not going to tell you where and when, particularly, because you don't really need to know that, but they're going to be sitting in the road, and, then you can come and arrest them. So the police already know, and you can make it public. You can have an assembly point or whatever, so thousands of people know where to go. And this is like the sort of genius, as it were, of the XR system, which is if you get lots of people, then obviously the police aren't going to stop it. It's too many people. So by being open, you get the best of both worlds. You get lots of people and the police can't stop it. If you're secretive, you're not going to get many people and then the police might stop it. So it's like a downward spiral rather than an upward spiral, if you see what I mean. So this isn't, this is nothing to do with being nice to the police. And if you look at the literature, of the global south, civil disobedience, civil resistance, people consciously interact with the police. And this is my final point. Did I make final point, which is how is this going to happen? How are we going to get structural change in our societies? There's a simple answer. When the police stop arresting people. The state and the elites are only powerful to the extent that the security forces do what they say. And as we should all know, a lot of police officers on the front line are really pissed off with the elites in the government, because of austerity and 101 other reasons. So if they get the idea that they can, go slow or make a statement saying they're not going to arrest you anymore, that's the primary objective. So subverting the police is not nothing. It's not a hippie thing, right? It's solid strategic thinking, which is why in these authoritarian regimes, people go up to the police and put flowers in their guns and all the rest of it. It's not because they're being nice, because they're smart. Once those people stop shooting, then you've got the downfall of the regime. And if you want a stat on this, I think Erica Chenoweth's research shows if you can subvert the police and the security forces, you're 60% more likely to bring down the regime. So, whether or not we're bringing down regimes, that's not really the issue here. The issue is when the police say, hang on a minute, we're not, arresting grannies 5 days in a row. That's not what we signed up for. They go to the politicians and say, you've got to sort this out. You've got to go to the negotiation table. And then when we get to the negotiation table, that's when we get real change. So, this isn't just a surfacey, minor issue. This is central to XR strategy. And yeah, it might not always work. You might not agree with it, but that's what we're doing. And it's starting to happen all around the world. And dare I say it, it works.